Salvetti discipuli. Today's lesson is on Chapter 30 in Wheelock's Latin, and we are going to learn the final two tenses of the subjunctive, the perfect and pluperfect, active and passive. We're also going to learn one more subjunctive subordinate clause, and we're also going to learn something called the sequence of tenses. Now, the sequence of tenses or the sequences, I should say, of tenses, are rules that govern what tense of the subjunctive you can have in any given subjunctive subordinate clause. And it dictates these tenses based on the tense of the main verb of the sentence. So I know that probably sounds a little crazy, a little jumbled, a little what at this moment, but give me a couple slides. I'll explain it. It's really not that bad. Okay, so first things first, you need to learn the perfect and pluperfect subjunctive. Final two tenses of the subjunctive, and there's of course an active and a passive. To form the perfect active subjunctive, you need the perfect stem, right, from the third principal part. You add ERI and then the personal endings. That easy, okay? To form the perfect passive subjunctive, you need the fourth principal part, the perfect passive participle, for the first word. And then, so that's the first word. Second word is the present subjunctive of the verb to be. Okay, so seem, cease, sit, seem, sit, sent. Okay? To form the pluperfect active subjunctive, you need your perfect stem again. You are going to add ISSE. So essentially that's the, or not essentially, it is the perfect active infinitive. Okay, so you need your perfect active infinitive and then the personal endings. And then to form the pluperfect passive subjunctive, you, for the first word, need the fourth principal part. For the second word, you need an imperfect subjunctive of the verb sum. So, asem, ases, aset, asemus, asetus, asent, okay? Just to remind you, over here in a little side box, I remind you of what the personal endings are. Remember that the first person singular can have a personal ending of O, but it does not for these particular tenses and voices and moods. So M, S, T, must, tis, nt, okay? I go through now, and I'm going to give you a paradigm for each conjugation, and I do want you to write all these down. Do not take screenshots. Do not just skip over them. Write them down. Be prepared to show them to me in your notes, okay? Perfect active subjunctive for laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum. We need the perfect stem, which is the third principal part with the I taken off. We add ERI and then those personal endings. So lauda verem, okay? Lauda veris, lauda verit, lauda verimus, lauda veritas, lauda verent, okay? For the perfect passive, we need our fourth principal part for our first word. Second word, obviously, the present subjunctive conjugation of the verb to be. So laudautus or sem, si, sit, si, sit, sent. Okay. Pluperfect active, we need, again, our perfect stem plus ISSE, or in other words, our perfect active infinitive, right? Lauda wisse. And then our personal endings. Lauda wissem, lauda wisses, lauda wisset, lauda wissemus, lauda wissetus, lauda wissent. Okay? Pluperfect passive subjunctive. First word, either laudatus or asem, asses, aset. In the plural, laudati, asemus, asetus, asent. Okay? Our second conjugation paradigm verb is moneo, to warn. So again, you can come through and see this same pattern is going to keep repeating. Let me just take this opportunity to tell you, one of the things that is great about the perfect system in Latin is that it works the same way for all verbs. That's true in the indicative, and now you can see it's true in the subjunctive. And I think, again, like the neuter law, there's certain things that you got to love, because they just don't change. Often there's so many exceptions, but not for this. So manuerem, manueris, manueret, manuerimus, manueritis, manuerent. Monitus sem, si, sit, sem, si, sent, so on and so forth. And the same for the pluperfect active and passive subjunctive, right? Manuissem, manuisses, manuisset, manuissemus, manuissetus, manuissent. Okay, and then manitas asam, ases, aset, asemus, asem. Third conjugation paradigm is ago. So agerim, ageris, ageret, agerimus, ageritus, agerem. Perfect passive, actus sim, actus sis, actus sit, actisimus, actisitus, actisent. Pluperfect active subjunctive, agisem, right? Because ag plus isse, right? Plus the personal ending. So agisem, agises, agiset, agisamus, agisatus, agisent. Pluperfect passive, actus asem, aseis, aset, acti asamus, asetus, asent. We then have our third IO, capio, capra, capi, captum. So caperim, caperis, caperet, caperimus, caperitus, caperen. Perfect passive, excuse me, captus sim, captus sis, captus sit, captisimus, captisitus, captisint. And then for our pluperfect active, capisem, right? Capises, capiset, capisamus, capisatus, capicent. Pluperfect passive, capta asem, capta ases, capta aset. Plural, capta asamus, capta asatus, capta asent. Okay. And then our fourth conjugation, audio, audire, audivi, auditum. So audive rem, right? Audive res, audive rit, audive remus, audive ritus, audive rent. Perfect passive, right? Auditum sem, auditum sis, auditum sit, auditasimus, auditasitus, auditasent. And then pluperfect active and passive subjunctive, audivisem, audivises, audiviset, audivisamus, audivisatus, audivisent. And then again, auditus asem, auditus ases, auditus aset, auditi asamus, auditi asatus, auditi asent. Okay. Now, I just went through all the trouble of saying all those words. The least you can do is write them all down. Okay? So make sure, again, that you show me those, that you wrote out all these charts, that you get good practice with memorization by writing these out. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about, I think, yeah, good. The next thing I want to talk about is the sequence of tenses. Now, like I said before, the sequence of tenses governs what tense the verb in a subjunctive subordinate clause can be. Just a little review. Remember that you know 4 tenses of the subjunctive at this point, okay? You know, and actually that's all there is. So, you know, present and imperfect, perfect and pluperfect, okay? You cannot use those tenses all the time. There are rules that govern when you can use in a subjunctive subordinate clause the present and the perfect as opposed to the imperfect and the pluperfect. So here's a chart that details the sequence of tenses for you. There are 2 sequences. There is primary sequence and there is secondary sequence that is sometimes called historical. The first column dictates the sequence. The second column tells you what tense the verb in the main clause is, and depending on what tense that is, that will dictate whether you can have present or present imperfect or imperfect and pluperfect in the subjunctive subordinate clause. So, primary sequence is when you have a verb in the main clause in the present tense, future tense, or future perfect tense, okay? So if you have a verb in the main sentence that is either of those 3 tenses, you can only have in a subordinate clause like a purpose clause, a result clause, or the indirect question, which we're about to learn in a second. You can only have a present subjunctive or a perfect subjunctive. The present subjunctive tells you that something's happening at the same time and maybe even a little in the future. The perfect subjunctive tells you that the action of the subordinate subjunctive clause happened before the action of the main clause, okay? Now, if you have any of the 3 past tenses, imperfect, perfect, or pluperfect, that's historical sequence or secondary sequence. And if you have any of these as the main verb of your sentence, then your subjunctive subordinate clause can only have an imperfect subjunctive to show action happening at the same time, or pluperfect to show action before, okay? So you will never see, well, never is a strong word, but you shouldn't see a verb in the present tense in the main clause that then has a pluperfect subjunctive in the subordinate clause. That should not happen, okay? All right. I also want to teach you guys about indirect question, and then we're going to look at a couple of sentences, and we're going to look at the sequence of tenses and indirect question at the same time, okay? Indirect question is another one of these subjunctive subordinate clauses. It allows you to ask a question indirectly, just like it sounds, right? It's set up with a question word, okay, like quis, who, quid, what. The relative adjective, qui, qui, quod. Quando, when, ubi, where. Quam, how, cur, why, unde, uter, utrum, an, ne. All of these are options, okay? And obviously you translate the indirect question depending on what question word is setting it up, okay? Sometimes the indirect question will employ this construction called the future active periphrastic, which is the future active participle plus a subjunctive of a some, the present subjunctive of some, to express the future. So remember, there is no future tense for the subjunctive. So sometimes, if you want to ask a question indirectly about what will happen in the future, you can use this construction, the future active periphrastic, where you use the future active participle plus the present or the imperfect, I suppose, of a subjunctive of the verb to be, okay? So there you go. Okay, let's look at some of these indirect questions using, whoopsies, hit the wrong button, using the sequence of tenses, okay? Our first one, rogant quando familia mea perveniat, okay? Rogant is our main verb. Our subjunctive subordinate clause, which is the indirect question, starts with our question word quando, and then we have our subordinate here. They ask, when my family perveniat. That's a present subjunctive, so it tells us it's happening at the same time as rogant. They ask when my family arrives, okay? Now, rogant, present. In this second example, we have perveneret. We have the perfect subjunctive. So they ask when my family arrived, okay, when they did arrive, because this is telling us that this happened before rogant. Now, let's change the tense of our main verb to the perfect. Rogavimus cur hoc faceres, okay? So our subjunctive subordinate clause is cur hoc faceres, our indirect question. We have the perfect subjunctive, which means the perfect indicative, which means that our subjunctive verb can only be the imperfect or the pluperfect. And here's the imperfect. So this imperfect subjunctive is telling us that this faceres happens at the same time as rogavimus, okay? So we asked why you did this, okay? We asked why you did this. In the second example, rogavimus cur hoc faceres, again, we have an indirect question, but now we're asking why you did this before we asked, right? We're asking pluperfect, secondary sequence, and we know that this is going to happen before the we asked, right? So we asked why you did this, okay? In this third example, rogavimus cur hoc facturus esses, we once again have an indirect question. Now we have that future active periphrastic construction that I previously told you about. We asked why you would do this, okay? The imperfect of the verb to be with the future active participle, it has to be imperfect because we're in secondary sequence, and rogavimus is perfect, so secondary sequence we have to use the imperfect subjunctive for the future active periphrastic. Rogat quis urbum servare posset, he asks who is able to save the city, present. Rogat quis urbem servare patuerit, perfect, because we're in primary sequence. He asks who was able to serve this, to save the city. I can't believe I just made that mistake. I yell at you guys for. And then rogat quis urbem servaturis sit, future active periphrastic. He asks who will save the city, or who would save the city. All right, take notes on all of these. Be prepared to ask questions, and I will see you in class. Walete.